I remember the sound of my husband's voice that night. It was not raised in anger, it was not harsh or violent, it was soft, almost a whisper. But that whisper carried the weight of 1,000 storms. He looked at me, his eyes wet with tears, and said, "I gave you everything, and you gave yourself to another man." That moment shattered me. I could not breathe. I wanted to vanish into the floor, to disappear from the shame of what I had done. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum, and I knew my life, my marriage, my dignity, everything, had just been set on fire by my own choices. Before I go any further, I want to pause and say thank you to everyone watching this. To all my subscribers, you have no idea how much your support means to me. You are the heartbeat of this channel, and every like, every comment, every share gives me the strength to keep pouring my heart out in these stories. To those who are new here, welcome. I am so glad you are here. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button, because that is the fuel that keeps this channel alive. And please do not just watch, engage. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what parts of the story touched you, because your words help others who are silently going through the same struggles. My name is Rachel. I am an American woman in my mid-30s, married for nearly 10 years to a man named David. He is the kind of man people call solid, steady, dependable, hardworking, faithful. He is not flashy. He is not the man who will sweep you off your feet with grand gestures or wild adventures. But he is the man who will hold you when you are sick, who will pray for you when you are broken, and who will come home every night because his family means everything to him. And yet, I still betrayed him. I wish I could tell you that it happened quickly, that one day I simply fell into temptation and lost control. But the truth is more dangerous. It happened slowly. Like a small crack in glass that grows wider and wider until the whole thing shatters, my heart began to drift before my body ever did. It started at work. I was a marketing manager at a small firm in our suburban city. Long hours, deadlines, constant meetings. That is where I met Ethan. He was younger than me, not by much, but enough to make him seem exciting, unpredictable. He had a way of making me laugh during stressful moments, of noticing the little things David had stopped noticing. If I wore a new blouse, Ethan complimented it. If I looked tired, he told me to take it easy. It felt harmless at first. Just kindness. Just friendship. But then came the long lunches. The conversations about life, about dreams, about how nobody really understands us. And then, one evening after a late project, he touched my hand when I was gathering my papers. It was a simple touch, but it felt like fire. That night, I went home and lay in bed beside my husband, while my heart raced with the memory of another man's hand. I prayed silently, "God, please, do not let me go down this path." But my flesh wanted what my spirit knew was poison. Weeks turned into months, and the line between friendship and desire blurred. Until one night, after a company event, Ethan and I were alone in his car. The rain beat against the windows, the air thick with tension. I knew what I was about to do. I knew it was wrong. But in that moment, I chose passion over loyalty. I leaned in and our lips met. I told myself it was just a kiss. But that kiss opened a door that should have never been opened. Once you step into that kind of darkness, it is not easy to turn back. The affair lasted 3 months. 3 months of lies. 3 months of sneaking around. 3 months of smiling at my husband while carrying the weight of a secret that was eating my soul alive. At church, I raised my hands during worship, but inside, I was drowning in guilt. When the pastor preached about adultery, my stomach twisted into knots. I knew I was living in sin, but the thrill, the excitement, it blinded me. Until the night David found out. It was not because I confessed. It was not because guilt finally broke me. He discovered a message on my phone that I thought I had deleted. I will never forget the look on his face as he held my phone in his hands. It was not just pain. It was betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak, and anger all wrapped into one. "Rachel," he whispered, "how could you?" I tried to speak, but no words came out. I fell to my knees, sobbing, begging him to forgive me, but I could see in his eyes that something inside him had died. That was the night my world collapsed. That was the night I realized desire had cost me more than I ever imagined. Chapter 1 ends here, with everything broken. My marriage, my dignity, my faith. And yet, deep down, I knew this was not the end of the story. Because where sin destroys, God still whispers hope. The morning after David found out, our home felt like a graveyard. The silence was unbearable. The smell of his coffee lingered in the kitchen, but he was gone before I woke up. The bed beside me was cold, and so was my heart. When he came home that evening, he would not even look at me. He walked straight past me, dropped his keys on the counter, and sat in silence at the dinner table. I tried to sit across from him, but the distance between us felt like miles. I wanted to explain, but what could I say? There are no words that soften the wound of betrayal. I am sorry felt so small, so hollow. Still, I whispered it. David, I am sorry. He looked up at me then, his eyes red and swollen. His voice cracked as he spoke. You broke me, Rachel. You broke everything. Those words sliced through me. The days that followed were filled with tension, so heavy I could hardly breathe. He stopped praying with me.
He stopped laughing.
He stopped touching me. The man who had once been my best friend now felt like a stranger in our own home. But the real pain came when he told me he could not go to church. I cannot sit there, Rachel, he said. I cannot worship next to you and pretend everything is fine. Everyone thinks we are this godly couple, but you know what you did. And I cannot stand in front of God like this. Those words crushed me because they did not only reveal his brokenness, they revealed mine. I had not just broken my vows to David. I had broken my vows to God. The whispers started soon after. Our church community noticed his absence. Friends asked where he was. And though we tried to keep it private, secrets do not stay hidden for long.
Rumors spread.
People looked at me differently, some with pity, some with judgment. I felt naked and exposed, as if my sin was written on my forehead. At work, Ethan pretended as if nothing had happened. He texted me, asking if I was okay. But every time his name popped up on my phone, I felt sick. The same man who had once felt like an escape now looked like a trap. Desire that had once felt intoxicating now felt like poison. I blocked his number. I avoided him at the office. But by then the damage was done. Nights were the worst. I lay in bed listening to David's steady breathing, knowing he was awake, but choosing not to speak to me. I cried silently, begging God to fix what I had destroyed. Lord, I whispered, please, do not let my marriage die. I do not deserve forgiveness, but please show me mercy. But heaven felt silent. One night, I walked into our living room and found David on the couch with his Bible open. He was not reading. He was just staring at the page, tears falling onto the words. David, I said softly, can we talk? He shook his head. I do not know if I can ever look at you the same way. His hands trembled as he closed the Bible. I trusted you with everything, Rachel. I built my life on us. And now I do not even know who you are. His words echoed through me like thunder. I realized then that reconciliation would not come quickly. If it came at all, it would take time, tears, and a miracle from God. That week, I called my mother. She had been married for over 40 years, and though her voice was gentle, I could feel the weight of disappointment. Rachel, she said, marriage is sacred. What you did was wrong. But if you truly repent, God can heal what you broke. The question is, do you want him to? Her words struck me. Did I truly want God to heal my marriage, or did I just want relief from the guilt? Because real healing requires surrender. Real change requires sacrifice. I began to pray harder. I fasted. I cried out to God, not just for my marriage, but for my soul. I opened my Bible, and one verse cut through me like a knife. Be sure your sin will find you out. Numbers 32:23. I had lived that truth. My sin found me out, and now I was reaping the consequences. But another verse gave me a flicker of hope. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. 1 John 1 verse 9. I confessed, not just to God, but to myself.
No excuses. No justifying.
I admitted I had chosen passion over loyalty. I had let desire become my God, and it had cost me everything. One Sunday, after weeks of staying home, I went back to church alone. I walked in trembling, certain everyone would whisper and stare. But something unexpected happened. The pastor's wife walked up to me, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "You are not beyond God's grace." I broke down right there in the lobby, sobbing in her arms. That was the beginning of my healing. Not because the shame vanished, but because I finally realized that even in my darkest failure, God's love was still pursuing me. But David, he was not there yet. He still slept in silence beside me. He still carried anger in his eyes. He was still broken, and I could not force him to heal. So I waited. I prayed. I hoped. And I faced the painful reality that reconciliation might never come. Because sometimes God restores, and sometimes He allows us to live with the consequences of our choices. I did not know which way my story would end. But I knew one thing. I would not let desire destroy me again. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. I had confessed my sin. I had repented before God. I was doing everything I could to rebuild the pieces of my shattered life. But David still carried wounds that only time and God could touch. For weeks, we lived like strangers sharing a roof. We spoke only when necessary, kept our distance in the house, and avoided each other's eyes. Our once warm, laughter-filled home was now cold and quiet. But slowly, something began to shift. It happened one night when David came home late from work. I had prepared dinner, though I had no idea if he would eat with me or retreat to the bedroom. To my surprise, he sat across from me at the table. We ate in silence for a while, but then he finally spoke. "I prayed today," he said quietly. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. My heart pounded. "What did you pray?" I asked cautiously. He hesitated, his eyes filling with tears. "I asked God to give me the strength to forgive you. But Rachel, I do not know how. Every time I look at you, I see him." Tears blurred my vision. "I know, David. I wish I could erase it. I wish I could undo it. But all I can do is show you, every day, that my heart belongs to you and to God." That conversation was small, but it was the first crack in the wall of silence. From then on, we began to talk more. Not perfectly, not without pain, but slowly. Sometimes it ended in shouting. Sometimes it ended in tears. Sometimes it ended in silence. But at least we were trying. One Sunday, David surprised me. He walked into the living room in his suit, Bible in hand, and said, "Are you ready for church?" I nearly collapsed in relief. That morning, we sat side by side in the pew for the first time in months. When the worship team began to sing, I lifted my hands, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw David do the same. It was in that moment that I knew healing was possible. But healing is not instant. It is a slow process, like mending a torn garment stitch by stitch. We started marriage counseling with our pastor. David did not hold back his pain, and I did not hide my shame. We laid it all bare. It was brutal, but it was necessary. Our pastor reminded us of a truth I will never forget.
Sin brags.
God restores, but restoration takes surrender. Those words became our foundation. I poured myself into rebuilding trust. I changed my routines. I deleted old contacts. I installed accountability software on my devices. I gave David full access to everything. Not because he demanded it, but because I wanted to show him I had nothing to hide. But more than anything, I sought God. I prayed like I had never prayed before. I opened my Bible daily, clinging to verses that spoke of mercy, grace, and second chances. One verse became my anchor. "Behold, I am making all things new." Revelation 21 verse 5. If God could make all things new, then He could make my marriage new too. And slowly He did. One night, as we lay in bed, David reached over and held my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like a miracle. I cried silently, gripping his hand tightly, knowing that God was stitching our broken hearts back together. Months later, something happened that truly showed me the depth of God's mercy. David looked at me one evening, his eyes no longer clouded with bitterness, and said, "Rachel, I forgive you." Those 3 words broke me wide open. I sobbed in his arms, thanking him, thanking God, and realizing that forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about choosing love over bitterness. Our marriage is not perfect. We still bear scars. But those scars remind us of what God has brought us through. They remind us that His grace is greater than our failures, and His love is stronger than our sin. Today, when I look at David, I no longer see only the man I betrayed. I see the man who chose to stay, the man who fought for us, and the man who reflected God's mercy in human form. And when David looks at me, I hope he no longer sees the woman who failed, but the woman who is broken, redeemed, and restored by God's grace. Friends, if you are listening to this and you are walking through brokenness, whether it is betrayal, guilt, or heartbreak, let me remind you of this truth. God can make all things new. You may feel unworthy. You may feel too far gone. You may believe the damage is beyond repair. But we serve a God who specializes in impossible restorations. I was lost in desire, but I found my way back to love, not because of my strength, but because of God's mercy. So, trust Him with your pain. Trust Him with your failures. Trust Him with your broken pieces. He can take the ashes of your life and turn them into something beautiful, because that is who He is. And that is the end of my story. If this testimony touched you, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Remember, you are never too far from God's love, and His grace is greater than your greatest sin.